Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the October 1st workshop meeting. I have no president's report this evening, so we're going to go over to our superintendent's report.
Thank you. Okay, just a few announcements and reminders for everyone. This week, Thursday and Friday, schools are closed. Next week, when we return, we'll be celebrating Week of Respect in all 5 schools. Next week on the 8th, October 8th at 7:30 p.m., we will be having an internet safety and child exploitation parent information session. That's being held at the Township of Ocean Intermediate School cafeteria at 7:30 p.m. And we encourage all parents to come out for that very important topic. We also have our 8th grade open house at Ocean Township High School. So where we invite our 8th graders to come see the high school, learn about the different programs, the 8th graders and their parents. And that is October 17th. So a lot coming up in the next couple weeks. Just wanted to put all of that on your radar, on your calendar. But I'm going to keep my report short this evening because we also have, I'd like to introduce Dr. Morgan, who's here this evening to present the fall 2024 assessment presentation from actually spring testing of the NJSLA, DLM, and SAT.
Great. And for the board, if you could keep your questions till the end of the presentation, that would be wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Walden. Good evening, board members, community members. I am here to present the assessment results from spring 2024 for NJSLA, DLM, and the SAT. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So we'll start with the NJSLA for English, Math, and Science. Next slide, please. The Every Student Succeeds Act requires that all students participate in federally mandated state assessments at a rate of 95%. Here are our participation rates for English language arts. As you can see, we exceeded the 95% participation rate at all levels. Next slide, please. And here it is for math. Next slide, please. And here it is for science. Next slide, please. The levels of performance for NJSLA, ELA, and math range from level 1, did not meet expectations, all the way through level 5, exceeded expectations. Next slide, please. And for science, the level 1 is below proficiency through level 4, advanced proficiency. Next slide, please. This slide compares our scores from 2023 through 2024 across all levels. So from level 1 through level 5, you will see how our students compare to each other from 2023 to 2024, each grade. Next slide, please. And this slide compares our district averages to the state average. Next slide, please. This slide compares grades 3 and 4 at each school to the district and the state. Next slide, please. And this slide compares grades 5 through 8 to the state averages in ELA. Next slide, please. And this slide shows the comparison between OTHS and the state in grade 9 ELA. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And these are our comparisons. Again, we just did ELA, so these are our comparisons for math from 2023 and 2024 across all levels, grades 3 throughout, through grade 3 through geometry and math. Next slide, please. And these are our 2024 averages compared to the state. Next slide, please. And here are our school averages compared to the district and the state. Next slide, please. At TOIS, grade 5 through 8 math compared to the district and the state. Next slide, please. Students who took the Algebra 1 assessment, TOIS, and OTHS compared to the district and the state. Next slide, please. And here we are with geometry with TOIS and OTHS compared to the district and the state. Next slide, please. Here are our science scores. Thank you. Level 3 and level 4 over 2 years. I'm sorry, level 1 through 4 over 2 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024. Next slide, please. And comparing our science scores to the state. Next slide, please. Now we will have our subgroup performance. As you know, the scores are returned and we have to discuss our subgroups. So our subgroups consist of female, male, Hispanic, Asian, Black, white, 2 or more races, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities, and our multilingual learners. And the average is our total population. So here it is for ELA across all grade levels in the district. Next slide, please. Here are our math results across all grade levels, all subjects, subgroups. Next slide, please. And for science. Next slide, please. And here are our subgroups by grade. So here's grade 3 for English language arts. Next slide, please. Grade 4 English language arts. Next slide, please. Grade 5 English language arts. Next slide, please. Grade 6 English language arts. Next slide, please. Grade 7. Next slide, please. Grade 8. Next slide, please. And grade 9. Next slide, please. Our subgroup performance for mathematics, grade 3. Total population at 57%. Next slide, please. Grade 4. Next slide, please. Grade 5. Next slide, please. Grade 6. Next slide, please. Grade 7. Next slide, please. Grade 8. Next slide, please. Algebra 1. Next slide, please. And geometry. Next slide, please. Subgroup performance for science for grade 5. 28% of our total population met or exceeded expectations. Next slide, please. Grade 8. Next slide, please. And grade 11. Next slide, please. So here are some things to celebrate. We are excited that our grades 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9 met or exceeded the state average in ELA. Grade 8 did not meet about 1 percentage point, so we know that we will meet it next year. Grades 3, 4, 5, and 8, students enrolled in Algebra 1 and Geometry for math met or exceeded the state average. Grades 6 and 7, again, they were short by 1 point and 2 points. TOIS's performance on Algebra 1 and Geometry is something to celebrate. They were over 90%. And grades 5 and 11 met the state average in science, which was an increase from last year. Next slide, please. There are some things, of course, that we need to focus on. We definitely need to focus on secondary math, meaning grades 8 at TOIS and grades 9 at OTHS, I'm sorry. And our overall subgroup performance, we still want to increase those numbers. Next slide, please. Now I will discuss the dynamic learning maps. The dynamic learning maps are assessments for students with the most significant cognitive disabilities whom the general state assessments are not appropriate. So the DLM assessments also help parents and educators set high academic expectations for their students. The results from the DLM assessments are used to inform instruction and meet accountability requirements for reporting student achievement. Next slide, please. The categories for DLM starts from emerging all the way to advanced. Next slide, please. For the 2024 testing period, there were 28 students who participated in the DLM assessment, including our 11 out-of-district students. Students from grades 3 through 8 and 11 participated, and every student had less than 10 students. Every grade level had less than 10 students. Therefore, we cannot report the scores by grade level. And the graph below, the next graph shows district-wide performance. Next slide, please. So we have our emerging, approaching, at target, and advanced in ELA, math, and science for students who took the DLM in 2024. Next slide, please. The SAT cohort from the class of, the cohort is the class of 2024. The SAT is a standardized test used for college admissions. It is produced by the College Board and is intended to assess college readiness. The evidence-based reading and writing and math scores from 200 to 800 for evidence-based reading and writing, and for math, and the overall score can range between 400 to 1600. Next slide, please. The SAT assesses various features, words and context, command of evidence, math that matters, essay, analyzing the score. Next slide, analyzing the source, I'm sorry. So our class of 2024 students exceeded the total group. Total group is all of the students who in the class of 2024 who took the SAT. Now, and the state. So OTHS, our average overall score was 1,076. For New Jersey, it was 1050. And for the total group, it was 1024. Next slide, please. And here is our 5-year comparison. Slide, please. So now that we have all of this data, what are our next steps? What are we going to do? So we started this year working with the administrators on how to use our data. Basically, it was using our data to tell a story. So we want to use our data to analyze and make sure that we are teaching those standards that students are falling short on. So administrative teams, we have already reviewed the data, reviewed the performance data. We are also coaching teachers on how to use their data to drive instruction. The data also helps us to determine what our professional development activities will be, our curriculum development and intervention services. We are continuing to hold data meetings as well as our INRS meetings and using our lesson plans that will help us to determine what our to help us to drive student performance and the performance data to address the individual needs and our academic goals of our students. Next slide, please. So the ELA next steps for K-5, we are continuing our focus on writing. Writing instruction will include modeling, guided practice, and independent application. And we are definitely going to focus on narrative writing because based on our NJSLA scores, we know we need to work in that area. We also have the grant that's in year 4, the DCICM grant, continued implementation of data-driven instructional coaching model to improve teacher practices and outcomes for students. We will continue to utilize Linkit, our data warehouse, as well as the assessments used to drive instruction. And we are training teachers in the SIOP model, which is a research-based instructional model proven to be effective in addressing the academic needs of our multilingual learners. Next slide, please. ELA next steps for 6 through 12. We are excited to have implemented a reading intervention curriculum, Read 180, in grades 6 through 12 at our Tier 3 and our special education students. We also hired a multilingual instructional coach at the intermediate school, and we know that this coach will help our teachers on how to support our multilingual learners. SIOP training again to support our MLs, and Spartans leading the way after school program at TOIS. Next steps for K through 5. K through 5 supervisor will continue to work with teachers in using data to target instruction, integrate differentiated learning opportunities based on our formative assessments, and adhere to the 40+40 learning period, where half of the period allows students to work at their own pace and receive differentiated instruction. And also we are integrate and extend the peer-to-peer collaboration so that students can discuss and increase student engagement in math. Math next steps for 6 through 12. We are continuing with the push-in model for math. We are providing intensive professional development for our secondary math teachers. Those teachers are our 8th grade math teachers, as well as the Algebra 1 math teachers at OTHS. We are continuing to use the data to drive instruction. Again, SIOP training is across all content areas, and Spartans leading the way. Here are some parent resources for parents who want additional information, and this presentation will be posted for those who want to dig a little deeper and ask questions. Next slide, please. I want to thank our supervisors for all of the wonderful work that they have been doing this year so far. We had a wonderful administrative retreat, and when I've been meeting with them weekly and talking, and just this week we've been having a lot of conversations about using data and standards and evidence statements. And those are the type of things that we need to do in order to boost our student achievement. I would also like to thank our wonderful teachers. They work hard, and these results, no matter how you look at them, I know that our teachers gave their best, and I know that they will continue to do their best. So thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. At this time, does the board have any questions? Mr. McCarthy?
Dr. Morgan, thank you for compiling all this. It's pretty exhaustive. And also, I guess I'll apologize in advance. It seems like no matter when you're in a meeting whether it's at the board or in a business setting, doesn't matter how you populate this stuff, people always have an idea about how it could have been done differently or
I'm
done
sure.
better. So I'm
I'll
sure
take
that
any
will come up tonight.
suggestions.
And so, but I can see what you did. You did a great job. I just have a couple big ticket questions, couple big blue arrows. Even though I saw what you pointed out with the 8th grade scores being below in certain areas, but it does seem like when compared to the state, that's the one area where we're not exceeding. Is that correct?
Well, no, because most of our students, which is a good thing about what's happening here at Ocean, most of our students are advancing. So those 8th grade numbers it's not the total population, because most of our 8th graders are taking Algebra 1 and some are even taking geometry. So we want to be sure that when we're discussing these numbers, it's not the total 8th grade. These are students who are not advancing to move to a higher level math in 8th grade.
Okay. And then the one other question I had, Madam President, was does this do you see any residual effects, through this assessment or any other assessments from loss of learning from the pandemic that seems to still be showing in these assessments? I know that's kind of a loaded question, but
Well, I can't say for sure, but after speaking with other districts, because I was concerned about 3rd grade, but 3rd grade seems to be that way across the state as well. And I've also spoken to Gerard, who manages our Linkit account, because I was a little concerned, but we did meet the state average. That tells me that it's across the board. It's not just here in Ocean. But I can't answer whether it's an effect of COVID.
Anyone else? Ms. Gilman?
Thank you, Dr. Morgan, for that presentation, and I'm especially pleased with the SAT scores. The increase in SAT scores and your emphasis on writing, the essay analyzing a source, the US founding documents, all of that is new to the SAT. So I'm glad to see an emphasis on the writing, and I'm glad to see our scores over the 5-year period have done so well. And yeah, the other supplemental work that you're doing in the secondary math, that can only be helpful. As you said, this is just kind of a microcosm. It's not the whole picture of our students. So all in all, I think there was much to celebrate. Congratulations.
Ms. Talarico?
Thank you. I actually have a question about any of the grades, but specifically grade 3. When you see that there's a point difference between the same grade amongst the 3 different schools, what do we put in place? Do we do observations? Like, I was looking at the one slide on slide 11, where Ocean Township Elementary School was 39, Wayside's 43, but Wanawasa was 65. So if there's that much of a point difference, how do we account for that if it's the same grade? This one was for ELA.
Well, it all depends. I mean, again, a loaded question. We know that OTES they have a number of multilingual learners that come in. So we don't know if that's it. I don't know without digging a little deeper and comparing kid to kid. We don't know if kids are just coming in, taking that test, or students who are in our multilingual learners. As you can see, our subgroups are not performing as well as the total group. So we would have to just look at the evidence statements and see where one school may be performing in one standard better than the other. It could be a student to student standards, a number of things that can be why students did not perform well at one school versus another school.
Okay. Do we look at trends and patterns from like the beginning of the year versus the end of the year?
With our Linkit data, yes, we do.
That was my next question,
Yes.
actually. So what is it actually that we're gathering from the Linkit data?
Well, from our Linkit data, we noticed that, one thing that we noticed that they are doing well on the standards, but Linkit does not assess writing. So that's why our focus has been writing, because even though they're doing well in Linkit, the multiple choice assessments, when they get to the NJSLA and they're writing, we're not sure if they are meeting the state standard with the writing. So what we are discussing, we have discussed, and what we are implementing is pulling writing samples from teachers so that we can be sure that we are inspecting what we expect, right? So we want them to write narratives, and we are telling them to use the rubric. And now they have to bring those writing samples to these data meetings so that we can discuss the writing.
Okay, I have one more question about that. I'm sorry, I wrote so many different questions, but how does AI kind of fall into the writing stuff? I mean, how do we know if it's an actual writing that a student created versus an AI bot?
Well, what we've been doing is educating students and teachers on how to effectively use AI.
Mhm.
And, with these trainings, we hope that our students, as well as our teachers, will be able to pick out what's AI and what's not. But again, it's all about the training that we're providing.
And thank you for putting this all together. I'm sorry I didn't see that in the beginning
No
because
problem.
I was too involved with all my
No
writing.
problem.
Mr. Schneider?
Yeah, I was noticing that the differences between the schools and one also stood out, so it was interesting to see if there's feedback as to when you go through the deeper dives, like how they kind of look demographically, maybe that's impacting it.
Right.
But I didn't know if we should, if there's a way to consider benchmarking our school in terms of schools that we want to be like, demographic schools that are like us in the district, rather than comparing generally against the district and or the state. And it looks like on the state averages, like they're very, very low percentages of things that are meeting those levels that we want to be, and we're measuring ourselves to a lower benchmark.
I'm sorry, can you speak up just a little?
Oh, we're measuring ourselves to a lower benchmark versus necessarily trying to raise the bar to try to measure ourselves against schools that we either want to be like or consider like our school district demographic and size.
And I'm sorry, I didn't hear your
I
question.
want to see about benchmarking differently,
Oh, okay, so
if that's a possibility.
to compare our district with another district that's like us.
Or a group of districts that are like us, or a group of districts that are like us that are exceeding and much higher levels. So we can keep an honest assessment. for
By the way, that was my, I was really thinking about that too, like, who do we want to be like and who are we like and how are we performing to that level? Yeah, I think to me, that would be much more pointed to know if how well we're succeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then on the SAT scores, we are above the state and the total group, but it seems like we've been declining over the time horizon that we had. So it's not necessarily a question for you, but I didn't know if there's ability to address some of those deficiencies that we might.
Well, one thing that I've been reading a lot about are the number of students who are actually taking the SAT at this point. A lot of schools have gone test optional and some students are just not taking it.
And then this is the measure, the average scores are the ones that are actually taking.
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mr. Weinstein?
Yeah, so in addition to what Brian was bringing up about comparative to schools that might be similar to us, I just want to say I appreciated the analysis and the next steps. That was helpful. I always sometimes I feel like we don't really know what what everybody's thinking happens next. So I really appreciated that. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Mr. Dalton?
More statements than questions, I think, but in light of the differences at the elementary schools, a question that comes to my mind is there a greater level of mobility at some schools than compared to other schools, right? And then we know that we may not have educated those children in their earlier years, or they may be new entry to the country. So some of those differences, it might just be good to know that information, to know if one school's seeing a greater level of mobility, because mobility, we know, we have a kid that shows up last week and testing is next week and they're being tested, but they weren't even educated in our system. I think a little bit differently than some of my board colleagues. I think the work with Linkit, I think the work with the supervisors and the teachers is all great work. I think we need to be careful when we benchmark to aspire outside of us, because then we may take the focus off of what we need to do and what we're already doing. I think it's good to look at. I think you have to be careful what you're benchmarking, because as I just pointed out with demographics, right, with mobility and things like that. There are factors that are different in each community, and resources that are different in each community. So I'm cautious about that because I think we should be proud of the work that's happening and the continued focus that needs to occur within those areas. And you spoke to that, the professional development, the analysis of data, how we look at the data. And then just because I've heard this outside of Ocean, just this idea that so much testing is going on now. Are our young friends taking it as seriously as they once did years ago? Because we are testing
A lot.
way more. And having been an educator, I've seen Chromebooks close in 5 minutes and I've seen Chromebooks close in 50 minutes. And that is a function that sometimes is beyond what happens in the school. So I just name that there's factors there that can't be answered. You'd be 200 pages and we'd be here till midnight still discussing. But thank you for all of your work.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any more questions?
I have,
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay.
And I did want to thank you for all your work. Apologize about that part. But then, yeah, you had mentioned that we had more work to do in the subgroups. I didn't know if you had anything specific that we were looking to accomplish there.
Well, definitely, we want to start working with our multilingual learners, which will impact all of our subgroups. You know, SIOP is not just it was written for multilingual learners. However, SIOP will help all of our students to master the English language. So it's not just a multilingual learner thing. I'm very excited about the PD that we've put in for that because we have all grade levels and all content areas participating in this course, which will make them certified to be in SIOP. So that's wonderful that we're putting that in place. Also with Read 180, our special education students will be getting this reading intervention program that is research-based. You know, I love Read 180. I use it in a former school district and my scores shot up because I really focused on our special education students and our students that were not reading. So that can encompass all of our subgroups. So those are the two top things that we're doing. And then bringing in a math professional developer to work with our students who are taking 8th grade math and algebra 1, because we know that those students are not moving. They're not advancing quick, or not advancing, that they are advancing, they're not accelerated. So they're not taking the accelerated math class, so they're in 8th grade math, but we still want them to be able to, you know, do math and take these assessments. So we don't want our 8th grade students who are taking this 8th grade math to be left behind because it's a small number of students. And because it is a small number of students, I think that we can actually move them.
Awesome.
Great. Anyone else? Thank you, Ms. Morgan, for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Wow, very clear and concise presentation. So thank you so much. Okay, with that, we will move on to the school business administrator's report. Mr. Hastings.
Thank you, Madam President. Just wanted to note we had rain over the weekend and the first few days of this week, and it was a blessing and a curse for us. The curse was that it delayed the start of the groundbreaking for the installation of the preschool playground at Wanamassa. We're currently working with the contractor to get a new date to get that started. And that'll be a little bit of a race against the weather and temperature to get that going. But our buildings and grounds supervisor is working hard to get that scheduled and on the books with the contractor. The blessing part is that we completed 2 new roofing systems at Wayside and Dow. Wayside plast with flying colors. We had no leaks at all for the new roofing system at Wayside. And the roof at Dow had 2 or 3 very minor leaks. The contractor was contacted and immediately came out and addressed those. So we have 2 great brand new roofing systems that are secure at both of those schools. So that was great news for us. The other issue I wanted to touch on was the RFP for the 163 Monmouth Road property. The ad for the RFQ will be in the Asbury Park Press tomorrow. We have scheduled walkthroughs or inspections, if you will, for the 11th and the 18th of this month for anyone who wants to come and do walkthroughs and get eyes on the property. The opening of the RFQs or RFPs or deadline to turn them in is December 3rd, which is a Tuesday. That'll be about 60 days. That'll be out to the public to look and inspect the property and put together proposals. We have a board meeting on the 10th of that month. I believe that's our only board meeting in December. So I look to the board, Madam President, Vice President, to give us some guidance on how you'd like to proceed after that. I think typically I would put together with the business office and the superintendent a summary of the proposals, the contractors, the proposed uses perhaps, and leasing fees for the board to review and then move on from there.
Okay.
And I would note that the RFP, RFQ will be online, available online, as well as contacting our office for a copy.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Gilman?
Any place else beside the press and online?
No, those are our two locations.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
And we have just anecdotally, we've had a couple calls for information on that as well. So people seem to be aware.
Thank you. That concludes your report?
Oh,
Mr.
yes,
Hastings?
ma'am.
Okay. I want to apologize to the public because I did not give them the opportunity to ask Ms. Morgan any questions on the assessment presentation. So Ms. Conway, I do want to go back to you and ask if there's anyone in the queue that has any questions in regards to the assessment that was presented.
No, Madam President, there are no questioners.
Right. Great, thank you. And with that, we will move on to public comment. Oh, there is. I did not see you back there. Ms. Hayes, come on up. I apologize. You are hiding in the back.
Alex Hayes, Oakhurst. I do have a couple other things that aren't related to Dr. Morgan, so I'll just ask Dr. Morgan stuff right now. I don't know if you all noticed the geometry slide was the only slide that had 0 students meeting expectations, meeting or exceeding expectations out of any of the slides for Black students, Hispanic students, poor students, multilingual and disabled. There were a couple slides that maybe had one or the other, like, you know, maybe multilingual didn't even show up. But the geometry was the only one that had all of those subgroups, not even having like 1% who met or exceeded the expectation. So I'm just wondering if we're looking at that or what that means.
Yeah, she can answer it for you.
It's not that they didn't need it, they were not enrolled in the course. Because if they didn't need it, it would be a 0. So that means we didn't have any students in those subgroups.
Okay. I'm not so sure which is worse.
Well, you have to understand that most of the students who have to take the NJSLA take it in algebra 1. So these geometry students are possibly 9th graders who will take in geometry.
Ms. Morgan, Dr. Morgan, I'm sorry. Perhaps you need to be near a microphone so that other people can, yeah, that would be great.
Don't need to put you on the spot.
No, not at all. Yes, so for the geometry slide, I think we had a total of 34 students. And these are mainly the students who are in that accelerated math. So we did not have any of the subgroups represented, because if we did, they would be, it would show 0 instead of just not there.
Meaning that there could be students in subgroups in the course, but there are not more than 10 where we would
Well,
report
these
it.
were more than 10.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a total of 34 students total who took geometry. Well, not took geometry, but had to sit for the test, because you only have to sit for the test in 9th grade. You don't have to sit for it in 10th.
But there is no under 10 in this, because then it would be a 0.
Right. Yeah, there was no under 10, because I did have to check that. There was no under 10 in this. So for TOIS, I believe it was 90. I'm sorry. So for geometry, 90% of TOIS students met or exceeded in 46% of open rejects.
Other questions for Dr. Morgan?
Sure.
Sorry, it does seem that over the years that our Hispanic student subgroups has been improving, which does seem to be a positive. And I don't know if you're crunching any data to see if that is a response to our push for ELL and multilingual language learners or culturally responsive teaching, or like if we're doing any sort of deeper dive into that subgroup, going up a little bit. But then conversely, the African American subgroup seem to 80% be lower than the Hispanic. And it used to be a little bit more like of a parity, you know, so it almost seemed like the Hispanic subgroup is improving better. But the African American subgroup is not, so I'm wondering if there's any. thoughts on it.
Well, yes, there are thoughts on that. We have been working with all of our subgroups. But again, as Mr. Dalton has pointed out, you know, kids come and go. We really have to understand that this is one moment in time testing, but that doesn't indicate how students are doing overall.
And I'm sorry, my last question is, and I've asked this before in other meetings. Like in the 9th grade ELA, I just threw that out there because I pulled it up on my, tried to pull up on my phone. When there was the number that for Black students, it said 53%, 9th. Like, is it for the subgroups? Is it for the percentage of those students, like 53% of all students, or 53% of all the Black students
53% of the Black
of
students.
the subgroup number?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. For all of them. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, the following are a series of motions to be read by the committee chairpersons. All motions have been discussed at a recent public work session. Some motions have been approved at a public work session, and the minutes for the approved items are posted on the district website. At this point in the meeting, we will now conduct the first of 2 public comment sessions. First session will be open for public comments on agenda items only. The second session will be at the end of the meeting and can be on any topic. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. Public comment is not a question and answer session. Specific questions can be directed to the administration. The superintendent's contact information is on the podium, and we encourage you to contact her with any questions. Public participation shall be governed by the following rules. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 5 minutes duration. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic until all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. And the presiding officer may request any person to leave the meeting when that person does not observe reasonable decorum. Would anyone from the public like to comment on any agenda item at this time?
Should sit closer. Alex Hayes from Oakhurst as well. 2 quick questions. Will the testing presentation be made online? And since the Bilingual Parent Advisory Committee is being voted on tonight, I was wondering when the next what the dates are for the remaining meetings of that throughout the year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Conway, is there anyone in the queue with any public comment at this time?
No, Madam President, there are no commenters.
Okay, thank you. We will now move on to action items. Mr. McCarthy?
Move to approve items 7.1 and 7.2.
Second.
Item 7.1 and 7.2, Mr. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Dam,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman,
Yes,
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Talarico.
Abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Mrs. Parliament's.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. Personnel,
I move to approve items 8.1 through 8.11.
Second.
So items 8.1 through 8.11. Mr. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Dam,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman.
Yes to all recused from 8.5.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Talarico,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein.
Yes to all, except I'll recuse myself from 8.5.
Thank you, Mrs. Barlamas.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Thank you, Mr. McGovern. Financial Management and Resource Services, Mr. Weinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. Move to approve 9.1.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. McGovern.
This is for item 8.1.
Yeah, is there any discussion on 8.1?
9.1.
9.1, sorry.
Sorry. Mr. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Dam,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. McGovern.
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Talarico,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Mrs. Barlamas.
Yes.
Motion
And then
carried.
for 9.2 to 9.4, before we bring it up for discussion, is there anything you'd like to point out, Mr. Hastings?
I would point out 9.4 is an annual approval for the district. It's a report that looks at our maintenance budget. It bases maintenance costs and repair costs on square footage. So basically, the document calculates based on the school's square footage. I believe $140 per square foot, what the minimum spend should be in our maintenance budget. And our maintenance budgets are consistently above that spend level. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Schneider?
On 9.2, is that intended to be exclusionary? Or it seems like it's written to not include the full student body?
The grant proposal or the program itself from Monmouth University?
Just a grant proposal.
So Monmouth University has done this now for a couple of years. We've had a few different teachers come forward with proposals ranging from all different projects. The teacher proposing the project sort of sets the scope of what they believe they can do with the $1,200 small amount.
But
of
it's
money.
not open for all female students.
That is the scope of the project that this staff member wants to do with the $1,200 that she could possibly, or that she is, being recognized for.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Weinstein. Instruction, education, and student activities, Mrs. Gilman.
Yes, Madam President, move to approve 10.1 through 10.4.
Second.
Is there a second?
Any discussion on any of those items? Mr. Weinstein?
I did want to say that the cybersecurity looked like a nice, from what I read in the curriculum, it looked like a nice entry level and introduction, nice scope of work there.
Thank you. This is the one that we received the grant for. So
Yes.
we're into the year, planning.
It looked like a good digestible thing
Great.
that people could walk away with. Yep.
All right,
Agreed.
Mr. Hastings?
This is for 10.1 to 10.4. Mr. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Dam,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern.
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Ms. Talarico.
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Mrs. Parliamus.
Yes.
Motion's carried.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gilman. Negotiations was done in executive session, so we will move on to policy. Ms. Gilman?
Yes, for 12.1, resolved that the board discuss the first reading of revised and or abolished policies as follows. This is our first reading.
Anyone have any questions? Mr. Schneider?
Just a clarification on discipline revised where it says dismissal. Is that expulsion? No.
Discipline or dismissal, I'm sorry. These
These
are teacher, staff. These are related to staff.
Just the staff. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
This is part of that review that the board has asked us to do of policies that, they're not new from Strauss Esme, or there's not a new alert about them. But this, as I've said before, the policy committee from a few years ago developed a list of policies to be updated. And as we're continuing to go through them and present them at the request of the board.
Then I would say it was well written, because then there's a dismissal policy, so when it touches on that, we have a policy for that, so thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Public relations, Mr. Weinstein?
Sure. How about if we discuss proposed board goals?
All right. All right, so I'm sure the board, for those of you who were here last week, we brought up the proposed goals. The goals that are on your computer screen are proposed board goals that are based off the strategic plan. Just reminding everyone. I did receive 4 of them. One was an adjective that was added to one of the goals. So I didn't think it was that important to send that out to you, but we're going to talk about that. One of the goals was from Miss Dam, and after speaking to her, we decided it was not really a board goal, but I would like for her to explain a little bit about that. So go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not as good as off the cuff speaking as some of us are here, so I wrote something. I promise it's quick, but just bear with me. I initially recommended focusing on improving the food selection for the 25 school year. However, after speaking with Mrs. Parlamas, I believe this issue should become a long-term district initiative. This is not just a matter of preference, it's about health and learning. Many parents, including myself and teachers and faculty, are deeply concerned about the food being offered to our students. Items such as Fruit Loops, Lucky Charms, Pop-Tarts, to name a few, contain harmful dyes like Red 40 and Yellow 5. These dyes are now known to be linked to behavioral issues in children, including hyperactivity, attention deficit, and learning difficulties, all of which hinder their abilities to succeed in the classroom. This week, California passed a bill that banned 6 harmful dyes in public schools under the School Food Safety Act. Just last week, Senator Ron Johnson led a roundtable discussion highlighting the harmful effects of overly processed foods and dyes on our nation's health. The momentum is growing, and it's time for us to act. As a district, we have a responsibility to prioritize the health and well-being of our students. And I'm asking in future meetings if we can make what I hope to be an initiative a reality and begin discussions on how we can make this, begin our discussions of how we can reevaluate and remove these overly processed food with these dyes out of our kids' availability to them. And we can lead by example and ensure our students have the healthiest environment possible to support their success.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stam.
Thank you.
So that is why it was removed. So if the board would like, in a future meeting, we could bring it up again and have a discussion about it. Is that something that the board would like to bring up in a future meeting?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that's
Thank you,
what we will do.
everyone.
So with that being said, so that leaves us with 2 more goals, and I do apologize, they did come in a little bit late, so I sent them to you kind of last minute. So I'm not sure if everyone had the opportunity to really read through. I know Mr. Schneider's was like, you needed a few minutes there.
Yeah.
So maybe we could just briefly discuss what you're proposing on this without having to really sit here and read it. Would you mind doing that?
No, I mean, for the bigger piece of that is trying to provide measurements to the goals. So I used the goals that we've addressed earlier for the work that was done previously and tried to push them into these what I was taking an attempt to make as goal 1, 2, and 3. I wanted to put a little bit more focus on our strategic planning over the next couple of years in terms of all the changing demographics that we're continuing to face, school funding, and looking at the school building as well that we talked about. So it's more about structure and creating opportunities that we could actually have assessments and measurements against. So when we talk about the goals, we could look back and actually have something to actually talk about in terms of either successes or things that we fell short on. And then the other piece is that I wanted to add, I guess, to the discussion is around our academic excellence and trying to improve math scores for all grades. I don't have all the dynamics of all the goals ironed out, but generally something that could talk to some of the improvements I would like to see that Dr. Morgan mentioned as well.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Schneider. Mr. Weinstein, yours is pretty much like the proposed board goals, except you did add a few.
I was one goal and modified one goal.
Exactly. So if you just want to,
Sure. The one item I added was support programs and efforts that continue to strengthen an inclusive district culture. So that was kind of important to me
okay,
to do. And the other was, I thought that the thing about effective communication was too much tied to the individual who was running the program. So I changed that to increase effective communication with the school community by enhancing online communication and promoting more effective school in-person events. That was my
okay.
two things. I didn't have as many adjectives as Irene wanted me to have, so. But
So I
sorry
think
about that.
what we should do is go back to the proposed goals and see if we can maybe tweak them, because a lot of what's here is on the proposed goals, and maybe if we want to add more, we can. So maybe we should go with the first one, support the implementation of district strategic plan, particularly the following: expanding the shared services with the municipality, examining the future use of 163 Monmouth Road. Is there anyone that would like to see more added to that?
That kind of encompasses Mr. Schneider's what you had, so I think that one is pretty
Are we okay with that
solid.
goal? Mr. Schneider?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't know if you guys thought, I mean, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but it almost looks like the improvement of safety and possible cost savings should be part of that strategic planning. Like, so if we were condensing that would be three
I'm
pieces.
sorry, approval of,
The second bullet.
okay. Which is evaluate operations and transportation
Yeah.
in order to
In
improve
terms of a focus
efficiency.
of strategic planning.
So you feel that they should be combined?
Yes, as a sub bullet under there. Mr. Watson.
I mean, my only question would be, is it too much to combine it into one, or is it better to keep it separate? I'm going to look at you and ask what your opinion would be on that. Is it better to keep them separate? If it is something, the transportation efficiency and the expanding shared services and the future use of 163. The second
I
one,
think they were intended to be different, but
If I may, under the umbrella of a strategic plan, that's where that would,
Right.
in my mind, it would fit.
Understood.
I'm not gonna argue about it, so.
yeah, it might be better separate only because the operations and transportation one seems to be, there seems to be a lot to that. So if we're interested in still keeping that one, maybe we should just keep it separate.
and I think that would really be the question is, are you interested in still keeping it? Because if we're adding some of these other goals, I think we're getting to
Yeah,
a
we
list
have
that
to
would
keep
be
it minimal.
difficult for the board to accomplish in the time
Agreed.
period.
Mr. Weinstein?
I just don't see how the point number 2, the operations and transportation, is a board goal. I mean, if we're supporting the budget and we're supporting the initiative
I
around
think
it.
the example that I gave last week was that we do a lot of courtesy busing in this district. And we bus as much as possible to convenient locations for families. We pulled back a little bit on that this year and faced some pushback from parents on that. So it would really be, I think, some part of board discussion if we were to do more of that, if we were going to try and look for cost savings.
How much is that in our discretion to make that decision?
Budget. I would imagine in
To
the
bus-
budget.
to
Yeah,
bus.
it's budget time.
I again say, I have no problem with you removing that, but that was through the review of the strategic plan, these were the ones where I felt like the board could have some influence.
Okay,
So is
But
that,
I have no
yeah,
problem if you choose to remove it. It's fine. Just
Okay.
these were the ones that were left, sort of. that we
so why
haven't-
don't we just kind of put a little mark near that one and get through these and see if there's any that were, sent out that we want to replace or add. Is that okay with you?
sure.
Ms. Gilman?
I think it's important to keep that one. I think that looking forward in a budgetary matter, we do have to take a close look at
Okay,
courtesy busing.
okay. All right, so then the third one is to strive to formulate budgets to promote program growth while falling within the state mandated tax levy cap. Is that the one that you wanted to add? Go ahead.
That's where I was going to insert the all important adjective of promote innovative program growth while falling within the state mandated tax levy cap.
I think that's fair. Can't really argue
As
with that.
opposed to non-innovative.
Opposed to nothing. But
Okay.
innovative could be things like the cybersecurity program that's we've
Mhm.
just incorporated, so
Okay.
innovative is kind of an umbrella. We could include many of our programs going forward, whether it's esports, cybersecurity.
Okay. Is that a board goal that we would like to hang on to? How does the board feel? Mr.
I
McClure?
just have a question. So to put this in like a concrete example, just so I understand. So if we were to go back to this year,
Mhm.
would the secondary approval that we did for the budget of, what was it, 4.5%, would that be considered within the tax levy cap? Based on this language here?
I'm gonna ask.
Probably is.
It would, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure that we're not restricting ourselves, although I did not agree with that vote, but
That's a good point.
I just want to make sure the board doesn't handicap themselves with the goal. Okay,
Okay.
cool, understood.
All
Thank
right.
you.
So, but bullet point number 3, is that something that we would like to leave in or take out? How does the board feel?
Even,
Yeah, leave in.
Leave in?
even.
Everyone okay with that?
Mhm.
Mr. McCarthy? All right, and then the last one is increase effective communication with school community by expanding the role of the community information officer, and I believe Mr. Weinstein added, he feels it's too much on the officer and mentioned increased effective communication with the school community by enhancing online communication and promoting more effectively school in-person events. Correct?
Yeah, online and, right.
Yeah.
Well, because the community information officer is really if somebody reports to you, right? Doesn't really
But
report to.
expanding the role would be
Yeah.
the board vote, would be a decision. Changing job description or time.
Yeah,
And that was taken word for word from the strategic plan.
Oh.
So that's why it's there. I have no problem with the edit
okay,
respectfully, but that's where it's
Okay.
coming. None of these, there was no intention here except a review of the strategic plan and something
No.
that could be tied to the board.
nothing taken.
So we could add,
That's what I was
school
asking.
community by enhancing online communication, promoting more effectively school in-person events into that.
Mhm.
So we could do both.
But-
If that is what the board would like to do. Ms. Dam?
Well, I was gonna say, and we can use the example of the meeting with the parents on the 7th. Is if we had some type of social media person that can make like I don't know if there's one yet, and it was a question that I had. That there's a flyer that can be put in, like the Wanamasa parents, the Wayside parents, like someone's in control of that, so it's easier and digestible for parents to know quicker of what's going on. So I think that kind of touches on what Jeff is saying about having the effective communication. And if, and this could, I don't know, be an internship with a student who wants to be in social media that can work in creating those quick banners that we can see, you know what I mean? Because I think that would be really easy for parents who work on the go, quick, just see it. Oh, there's that meeting on the 7th. Thanks for the reminder, moving forward with that.
Okay.
So the flyer went out. Are you, just to clarify, you mean an additional reminder to?
Yeah,
parents?
yes. like closer to the date. I'm just using it as an example, not saying that didn't happen, just
Okay.
as an example.
And I would also just question the piece about more in-person events because parents often comment that it's difficult to come to in-person events. So we have tried to meet parents where they are with more options on events. And a lot of those are not in school. And we still do many in-school events, not, just to look at our calendar, you'll see tons of events, but I don't know. I'm not sure the impetus behind the more in-school events.
Wait
Well-
one second, Mr. Dalton, only because I called him Mr. Schneider
Yeah.
and.
Now we're talking about it, I do have it seems it seems odd to me now that we're focusing on one particular role in the district. So if our function as a board is to budget and to write policy and to hire our fine superintendent, then wouldn't we want to have a more broader goal around communication and effective communication around the community within the district and our constituents?
Just because it was
Okay,
I wanted it to not be necessarily, I wanted it to be something that was a district-wide thinking process.
Mhm.
It could be something that the community information officer helped leads the charge. But it was
Mhm.
more than it was everybody kind of becomes sensitive to it.
Okay,
Okay, sorry about.
Yeah, because I
Um,
started going down all right, so what's this person's 30, 60, 90, 180-day plan? Do they have to report back to the board? And I'm starting to feel awkward about it.
okay. Mr. Dalton?
I think taking off of Mr. Weinstein and Mr. Schneider's. And I agree with what our superintendent said, parents with childcare and everything getting out, but could it be to increase engagement? Or to enhance engagement or, through whatever venues there are? So. The more information that gets out there, the hope would be that the more engaged families can become. Right? So
Add the word engagement somewhere in there.
somewhere, I mean,
To enhance engagement.
increase effective communication with the school community by expanding the role of the community information officer. I mean, or if you want to take that out and they say expand the various methods in which we communicate to increase family engagement, if we don't want it to be hooked to the one person. But
Do we want to remove the community information officer from the goal or leave it in?
You could say increase effective communication and engagement with the school community, period.
yeah,
And then how we're doing that.
that's implied that it involves, it involves our superintendent, it
And the
involves,
community
yeah.
officer.
it involves all the principals, it involves,
Okay,
all
right, I like that
That's
too. All right,
like
sounds
that.
good.
Mhm.
All right, and then we have increased effective I did that one. Okay, so we're gonna go back to the top. Actually, we're not. We're gonna go and look at support programs and efforts that continue to strengthen an inclusive district culture. Is that something that the board is interested in adding? Anyone have any comments? Mr. McCarthy, did you have your hand up?
Can I get some specific examples of how we achieve that? Just so I know what I'm supporting here.
Well, I think
'Cause it sounds great.
I mean, the
Like, is that inclusive, like,
inclusive culture is like a defined thing, which is basically accepting other people for other walks of life, right? And I think the reason I wrote strengthen is because we're already doing that at some level.
yeah,
And I guess I want us to just feel like it's important to us, right now, you have a war going on in the Middle East and who knows what kind of actions come out from that. We have an election coming up, which people are gonna have differing opinions, you have civil unrest, which who knows how it all goes. And I guess as a district, we do take the time to do that, but I want to make sure that it's an important thing that gets done. That was my thinking. Yep.
I would just say to add to what Mr. Weinstein was saying, when we started to talk about this last time. A lot of that also, we were talking about where it laid into budget, because this year we had to make some decisions with budget. And when we look at Dr. Morgan's presentation from this evening, there's work that the district is doing to our multi-language learners and things like that. So making sure that we are informing those decisions within our budget as well is an important part of that.
Okay.
I mean, just to Kelly, Ms. Waldman, when I say strengthen, that's probably the right term, right? Because we're already kind of trying to do those kind of things. Is that?
Sure, I think so. I mean, and I think that we'd have to figure out where the board has the influence on that, which would be through budget.
Right. That's why we support programs and initiatives that. Right.
Innovative program.
Okay, does anyone have anything to say?
Can you
about
read it
that?
again, how it says?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I have support programs and efforts to continue to strengthen an inclusive district culture.
That's what Mr. Weinstein.
That's what Mr. Weinstein, correct.
And grade me later.
I just, I thought you had edited it, but that's.
No, I think I haven't had the opportunity. I don't know if
Okay.
you rewrote it in a
did
different
not.
way. Okay, so, but we would have to probably plump that up a little bit before if it's something that is the board interested in pursuing this goal
And reworking it for.
and reworking
for
it? Yeah, just
discussion.
adding a few words to it.
Yes, I would.
Anyone have any more suggestions to, word wise, how they would like it to read, or they're happy with the way that it reads?
I know that it's like basically the same word, but the inclusive and inclusion, like I feel like somehow saying inclusion in the goal.
Yeah, inclusion shouldn't mean exclusion either, though.
What?
Inclusion should not.
I think it's written impeccably well.
Yeah.
I like it the way it is.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Leave it that way then.
Brian, what did you say about inclusion?
Well, I shouldn't mean exclusion too, like in some cases, so where you have, I worry about that. And I think that if we're looking at, we shouldn't blanketly say we're gonna support everything for budget. If it falls under that category, we should look at everything individually and see if it fits our needs.
We do.
Okay, the only other one is the one on the one that Brian mentioned about the math scores for all grades. And I'm not exactly sure if that falls under something that the board would look at unless it turns into some form of an
That
initiative.
was a measurement.
It was a
The
measurement?
goal
Okay,
was actually a little broader.
okay. So that's not actually one of your goals. I'm trying to read.
Goal 2 above it. See, it says goal 2 above it, I think. No,
Encourage
sorry,
and
goal
engage in
1 above
demanding
it.
an aligned range of learning opportunities for all students, pre-K through high school plus, to achieve college and career readiness upon the completion of their educational program. Is that the one that
That would
probably
be
is
something
not?
on that could strive towards academic excellence for all students.
That one seems like a really broad
It is. It's hard
and
to-
difficult goal for a board to achieve in a year. I mean, that's just my 2 cents. I don't know how everyone else feels about that. I think it's great. But I think that we have to maybe look at our administration when looking at something like that to see how can something like that be accomplished
In a year.
in a year.
Well, then if we narrowly focus it and focus it on something that we want to all improve on, which is math, as an example, is that something that would fit? Like, we're missing academic excellence in the goals.
Okay. I'm going to turn to Ms. Weldon and ask her what her opinion is on something like that as a board goal. And like Mr. Weinstein mentioned, perhaps narrowing it down to just math.
Did you say that?
I think if you do that, I think if you add.
I'm sorry, Mr. Schneider, sorry, not Mr. Weinstein. Mr. Weinstein on the brain.
I said an innovative program. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it can be connected to that one though, because it's,
Okay,
the board can't develop
Right.
No,
engaging, demanding, aligned range of learning opportunities for students. The board cannot do that. That is happening here, by the way. We are developing and encouraging, engaging, demanding an aligned range of learning opportunities for all students, pre-K through high school, plus to achieve college and career readiness. I mean, it is the work that we do on a daily basis. So if you want to say through policy or through budget and like supporting the administration in there through budget. But again, I mean, we're tying a lot of things to budget here.
Yeah.
That's making me nervous.
Right, right.
But that's how the board would support. That's what the board could do.
Right.
Well,
You know, do you have am I on the right path there? Like that the board can't develop learning?
No.
Yes, you're on the right path.
Okay.
what Denise, if I may, since we're talking about my objective here, is there opportunity to vote to see if there's a desire to have an academic goal? It doesn't have to be what I'm suggesting. We find the right one.
Look at last year's act. I think there was a. We took it from the strategic plan and there was one that was that had to do with, I believe there was one.
You have that.
So maybe.
Bringing it up now.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mr.
Shared
Lawler can
services,
do that.
policy making, formulate budgets, continue to work with the administration on enhancing school security, support policies to actively recruit diverse candidates and support the administration and staff fiscally as they maintain standards based instruction for our students. That was the only instructional thing. I just want to be careful that we are not overstepping our role as the board.
Right. As
How
policy
far
maker.
we go in telling the administration what the focus needs to be.
Well, and the budget that promotes program growth is, our programs are academic. So it is an academic goal when you're promoting program growth. You know, it is an academic. I mean, it's not saying let's all get 1,600 on the SATs, but
No.
you also have to be realistic in academic goals that you set. But I would say that's where your academic goal lies. So maybe changing the name, you know, like if you want to get a little bit, adding something else in there. Well, what is it? It's innovative programs, right? It's actually innovative
Correct.
programs. I mean,
Innovative educational programs that demonstrate
you could
growth,
do that. Innovative educational programs.
programs.
How do we measure that?
focused on growth.
And I like it, I like it.
No, I know.
Is that good?
You measure it based
Yeah.
on what programs we bring and what programs we rewrite and what programs we, you know, how they get implemented. You were like, and stuff like that.
Okay.
It's,
So, like,
but it's
for-
not, I understand what you're saying, like but also some of those math goals, like what you think our math goal should be is probably a math goal of our math department. Cause you have your board goals, then you have your superintendent goals, then you have your supervisor goals, then you have your department goals. So it's not the goal that's gonna be here because we're not gonna go tutor kids, you know, students for their math. But maybe our supervisors are implementing a tutoring program. So they'll sit down with Ms. Weldon and set those goals. So more specific on getting benchmarks up and stuff like that fall more, am I wrong in this? Fall more into the supervisor goal or into the superintendent's goals or the department head goals. So that's where it always gets tricky when writing these, because we all would love to say, let's get this much more on X, Y, or Z, but there's no way for us to do that besides to
Instruct.
strive to formulate budgets that promote the growth of those programs. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, but I didn't know, again, like from a macro level, where we're kind of setting the goals for the district that
Right.
the superintendent sets her goals off of, that we should have some academic component to it.
Mhm.
And I don't have the words for it, but
Right.
Mr. Dalton?
And I'm just remembering, we did approve like some new math program this year at one point, right? I mean, we have,
That would be where the board supports
Yeah.
it. It's like, and you're speaking about math right now, but last week we approved the SWIFT program, which was nutrition, fitness, mindfulness for the high school. That was a new program. We approved new BPAC outreach, family outreach coordinators. So you're talking about more engagement of families. That was a program that we presented to the board last week and
Yeah,
you
exactly.
supported. Tonight, I think we had Dr. Morgan talked about Read 180, a reading program that we've put in place at the secondary level to make a difference in what we are seeing when we dive into our data and analyze it and look at goals we have for ourselves as a district. But that's the work of the educators every day. These are really more goals for the board themselves to implement and support this from from now, from the time we implement them to the end of this school year.
Ms. Talarico.
I just have one question based on what, you had written and stuff. Because I do agree about the excellence in our academics. And I do agree that it should be somewhere on there about measurable. Is there a way that we can get maybe quarterly board updates about mathematics scores or what is being put into the observations or the new programming or, just so that we're more aware of what is happening behind the scenes. Maybe it doesn't have to be in the board goals, but something to that effect.
I think we can discuss it. I think I would need to know more of what the assessments, the state assessments are once a year. And every time we have them, we present them to the board in a full presentation.
I guess my point is that I've sat here for 5 years and the assessment scores in math are low, and each year we kind of talk about the same broad, vision, I guess. And to your point, could we do something more measurable, more specific or detailed, just to give not just us as a board, but parents and, just an idea of what's happening. So next year, we're not sitting in the same spot with, the scores being not met or only 30% met or exceeding.
Would it have to be like that program that you mentioned that Dr. Morgan spoke about, that Route 180? Could we maybe focus in on that program and see how that is helping our students? Is there a way to measure that to see, bring it back to the board? I don't know. Do you think that's possible?
I can certainly discuss it and investigate what type of data we would have available to us to look at. We're just starting, so we would
Right.
not necessarily have comparative data, but we could definitely take a look at that.
I mean, that may be a start.
It's not for all students, it's
Right,
for a small
understood.
subset of students, but
Mr. Weinstein?
I just don't know how that's I guess, I don't know that's a board goal. That's a superintendent
Mhm.
goal. I don't know if it's a board goal. We asked Dr. Stefankowitz on a quarterly basis to give us an update on his some of his superintendent goals. And I think we did it like 2 quarters or something like that. And he gave us a little synopsis of what it was, which was okay, which one of our board goals was to have quarterly updates by the superintendent. That was one of our board goals. We had a big discussion at that time whether that should have been a board goal, not a board goal.
Right.
And then when you checked it with the who's the group we work with? The
New Jersey School Boards.
New Jersey School
Field
Boards.
Board.
Yeah, they weren't really that in favor of that one. They didn't think it was really a board
Right.
goal. So the next year we didn't, and next year when Irene was there, we didn't really have it. So
I think it's so broad and so focused on the administration. I think that's really
Yeah.
falls under the administration, that it's a difficult thing for the board to kind of support unless we are supporting initiatives. Mr. Dalton?
All right. I'm hearing a few things. And I think that there's 2 points to this that I'll say, and I'm not saying we do them, I'm just thinking out loud. Okay. One is that we are looking at agendas and we are approving things that are related to exactly what we're discussing now. Right? We approved Envision Math this year. We just talked about Read 180. That's on us to make sure that if we're not sure, we ask some questions. I think from the administration side and ask something to the effect of what are the innovative programs that we are approving this year or that are in progress this year, and can we get some small updates on those, digestible updates on those, so that we're educated on that, because I'm hearing a bit of a disconnect on maybe understanding that we have approved some great things and we are doing some And maybe we're, overwhelmed by the amount of things, right? But like, what are the ones that Ms. Weldon says, I want to make sure you know this, and shares that with us. It doesn't have to, I am not saying a big full report, but we approved Envision Math. The teachers have been trained. This is one of our things in math where our goal is to blank. Because we're approving it, and sometimes, like tonight, I think it was great. Some good questions came up for Dr. Morgan, but that was a lot of data coming at us. Read 180 is a very popular program in education, and it's good that we all understand that that's happening, right? So I think it's on us to make sure we're asking questions, and maybe we could develop a system with our superintendent where it's not reporting everything, but some highlights that she feels we need to really know and understand that will inform our decisions.
And if I may, along those lines, and we had the summer months in there, so there was less of this, but that was the whole purpose of the board presentations that we had last year that we hadn't had in a long time.
Yes.
To showcase how budgetary things that we've approved or things that we might need in the budget, how they are playing out in the school day. What are the innovative programs that we are developing? How are we doing that? What is the connection to the classroom? What is the connection to home? And we're starting to schedule them already for this year. So they're coming. So maybe that is also adding to some of this, but I'm happy to, and I said this last year, I'll say it again. If there are suggestions for things specifically that the board would like to see here and see a mini presentation or a spotlight or a full-blown presentation, as some of them have been, I'm happy to try to coordinate that in a timely fashion.
So perhaps we won't make it a goal, but just look forward to these presentations and hope that, some of the questions that you all have in regards to math and so on will be answered in some of these presentations. Are we okay with that? Is that okay with you, Mr. Schneider?
I mean, if we're gonna leave it off and you're kind of opening up to requests, and I would like to see what we're doing in the district every single quarter with our math programs throughout the district, because I am concerned about that.
Okay, Ms. McGovern?
I was just gonna say, when we've said we want things quarterly in the institutional knowledge past that I have, when we've said we've needed things quarterly, it hasn't produced a presentation that was worth anything. It's been a waste of time for a lot of people, even sitting here at times. One thing that I will say that I remember presentation wise, to Ms. Weldon's point of bringing people in, when we went to the Wilson reading program, or not Wilson, what was the reading program before that? When we went to a new reading program, I can't.
Wonders.
Thank
Right,
you.
Wonders.
Wonders. We had a full presentation about Wonders, what Wonders was going to do, what Wonders did. Then we got updates, about Wonders. So Envision, when we talked about Envision last week, Ms. Weldon, we were expanding Envision within our school, which is what Ms. Weldon, reported out. And to Gerard's point, if you don't know what Envision Math is and you have more questions, I think that in years past, there's been, if I had more questions, I would call the superintendent and say, I have questions about this. I don't understand it. What is this about math? What is this about this? When we get bits and pieces of the information, I think that you might be looking for throughout every week, right? If we're putting in if we have a personnel person, right? And it's a personnel and it's a, job coach. I'm just throwing, whatever. If it's a job coach or something, we are told we are putting in this job coach person at Dow Avenue School because we saw that it worked really well at Wayside School, and this is going to be great for, math. And so that is an update on what we're doing for math, and so it's to me in real time is more effective of what we're doing. Okay, we're doing this right now because we found a need, we did it. Or during budget, we have a whole conversation of the people that we're going to have to add and why we're adding them. And we sit here and we discuss whether we should or should not add them. And then we say, well, we can't afford to add this, so we cut it. And then we question what we're doing in math or what we're doing in ELA or what we're doing here because we haven't added the position that we actually wanted but was a 3 because we knew we couldn't afford it. So I think real-time updates, or I think a small presentation about maybe to the board because not everybody's been here since Envision came or since Wonders came. you know, a 15-minute, whatever, maybe something like that. But I don't need our staff to go looking for data that doesn't in some ways make sense. Like
And it
to
may not
just
even
to
exist.
just to
you know,
even just to
quarterly.
make a presentation quarterly to the board. So that's my feeling on it. I think that we listen to things that happen. Maybe we get an update of programs throughout this year. Maybe that if that's what we want to focus on, programs that we've implemented in the last 5 years that have been for different things and what we've added to them. If that's like a focus of what we want to know towards striving to formulate and understand our budget, you know, the programs that we're promoting, then I think that's more valuable than finding out the test or that in 3rd grade in Mr. Hastings' class, all of the kids have A's. It doesn't mean anything. Because all of those kids could have A's and then they could all not bomb isn't the right word, but they could all not test well or.
We certainly couldn't present that information that granular.
Nope.
Right.
No.
Mr. McCarthy?
Yeah, I would just like to recommend that I mean, based on what I'm seeing, it seems as though the board has sort of concluded that we're not going to add this to our goals, but that we make clear that at any time, any member of the board is allowed to request anything to be presented that's, in accordance with our dictates. You just will need a majority of the board to support that. So if there's an initiative that you'd like us to start to track, and in the past, I think we've been successful in achieving that in terms of discipline. Some would disagree with that, but I think that we have received presentations on that when the board has requested. So I would recommend that maybe we either decide yes or no. Would we like to include something like this in our goals? And otherwise, at any point, any member of the board can request this. And as long as the majority of the board is in concurrence, we will see that information.
Okay.
I have a question.
Ms. Talarico?
I'd like to know exactly what information has to have a majority of the board. Is that a vote for whatever it is, or can individual board members ask questions? Because that seems to be a very muddy area on this board.
What I'm remembering is back, I don't know if it was 1 year ago or 2 years ago. I can't be exact on that. 2 years, I guess, when you were president.
Yes.
The board had decided to do, a board member can't raise their hand and say, I want, all this information on special education. When just that one specific board member wants that information, it should be the majority of the board that wants that information so that we could spend some time on that. I think that was the purpose of it.
It was actually more.
There's a point of order. Only board members are supposed to be speaking at this time. So I would just ask for proper decorum from the audience, please.
So,
Yeah,
Mr. Weinstein.
Yeah, so the way we got to that was that no one board member can be directing the superintendent to do work, right? It had to be
That's
true. The majority
Very
of the board
true.
that was directing the board, directing the superintendent to do work. So that's how we kind of got to that. And then also, I think it was also the amount of things that were being asked. It was kind of, that's why it got to
Okay.
that spot.
Thank you
Right.
for that clarification. Mr.
Yeah.
Dalton?
Just want to be clear that Ms. Weldon has always returned my calls or been willing to take a call for any information that I've had questions on. But I appreciate what Mr. Weinstein is saying. The running of the district on a daily basis, we have to be very careful that we're not taking the focus off of that for smaller bits of information, important bits, but what's the focus right now? What's the focus on the strategic goals? Like, let's not divert that attention from where it needs to be. Let's be very careful about that.
Okay, so with that, I want to go back to the proposed goals and I want to ask the board, with bullet point number one, are we happy with the way that it reads? Is there anything else that should be added or taken away? We good with that? I just need a shake of the head. Okay, number two, bullet point number two, anything we want to add, change? Do we want to get rid of it? I seem to remember hearing that people wanted to keep it.
I'm gonna, if you guys want to keep it, great. I didn't think you needed to, but
Does the board want to
Doesn't
keep
matter.
it? Keep it in?
I think it's gonna end up being a budgetary conversation. I don't necessarily need it to be a goal.
Okay, so let me just, how many people feel that it should be a goal? Can you say yes? So just raise your hand.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Let's go.
And so I guess it's gonna remain.
I'll vote for being a goal too.
Okay.
6.
So it's gonna remain. Okay, but bullet point number 3. Everyone, we're keeping it as it is, changing the wording.
I thought we changed.
Putting the word innovation.
That one is gonna be, what did we say to that one? Say
Promote innovative programs.
Innovative education.
Yeah.
Is that the one?
Innovative.
Say to promote
Innovative
innovative.
education.
Amy,
Okay.
you added the educational.
I had such a migraine.
Okay, so I
Sounds like
think
at the
strike
end of-
formulate budgets that promote innovative educational programs that focus on growth while falling within the state mandated tax levy cap. Is that
You
good?
said.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and then bullet point number 4. Are we keeping it or are we adding innovative?
Increase effective communication and engagement with school community.
Right, where's that innovative? Oh, innovative was the last
Innovative
one.
was the
Okay, I'm
last
getting all
one, right.
confused. So, yeah, so keep it as it is, correct?
No, just
No.
what I just read.
What you just read.
I have it.
Or you have it, I do not.
Effective
Okay,
communication and engagement with school community.
okay.
Sorry, I got punched.
So we're not adding any more to that?
No.
That line? No?
Okay. Then there was Mr. Weinstein, support programs and efforts that continue to strengthen inclusive district culture. Keep it as is, add it. Everyone's okay with adding it? So we will have 5 board goals.
Yes.
5, okay? All right, so next week, these will be, or 2 weeks, these will be sent to you. And it is a regular meeting and we will get to discuss them one more time to make sure they are correct in workshop. And then we will vote on them in the regular meeting. Okay? Good. Wonderful. Anything else on board goals? Okay, with that, we will go to old business. Is there any old business from the board? Is there any new business? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Gerard and I attended TOIS back to school night after our last meeting, and I just wanted to commend the principal Amato and Mr. O'Neill for their presentation, and it was very well attended and it was very enjoyable.
Great. Mr. Dalton?
I will echo that. And since it was my first time there, Mr. Amato encouraged me to go in to see the students as
Yes.
they presented for clubs. And I will just say that was a highlight for me.
Oh, that's great.
That was-
Awesome. Thank you for your comments. Any new business from the board? Okay. Right. We are now ready for public comment. Once again, Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. Public comment is not a question and answer session. Specific questions can be directed to the administration. Superintendent's contact information is on the podium. We encourage you to contact her with any questions. Public participation shall be governed by the following rules. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 5 minutes duration. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic until all others who wish to speak on that topic have been heard. And lastly, the presiding officer may request any person to leave the meeting when that person does not observe reasonable decorum. So I'd like to ask, is there anyone in the room that would like to make a comment on any item at this time? Come on up. Just state your name, please.
Just got super nervous. Okay.
Don't be nervous.
Don't be nervous.
I'm Bethany Danishkar. I'm a math teacher at the high school. That's why I'm nervous, because you guys talked a lot about math. But I am also the proposer of the grant that was talked about in section 9.2. And I was listening at home, so I drove over here real quick. There was a comment about it possibly being exclusionary, and I just wanted to put on the record that what was not put in what was presented to you was a line that said that all students and all faculty could come to any of the discussion meetings that we would have at the round table, whereas the guest speaker focus would be females of color within the community and professional roles. So that would be the focus of the guest speakers, but in terms of those of people who would be invited to the discussion table, it would be open to the entire student body and the entire faculty.
Thank you, Ms.
Just
Danish.
wanted to say
for
that.
that.
And best
Thank you for your
with that
comment.
grant.
Okay, is there anyone else in the room? Ms. Hayes?
That was so nice of a teacher to come in and clarify, because it would have been nice if somebody else could have clarified, but you guys can't ever speak on on questions that people have. It's kind of frustrating. Feel bad that she had to drive all the way down here. Anyway, according to New Jersey School Boards Association, any school board member can ask the superintendent for any information that he or she wants, as long as it's what the average public person could get. So John, if you wanted certain information and you wanted to ask Kelly, as we all know, you do not need a majority to vote, as long as it's not confidential information. It's absurd that you have, you're trying to stifle people getting information. And John, you're quick to shout at me about lack of decorum by interrupting the president, because I said a comment back there. I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, we used to sit in workshop sessions, and they actually used to talk to the public. And it wasn't so, you guys are on the dais and like you could shout, you could raise up your hand, you could say, oh, wait, what'd he say? What was that? And they could talk. But interrupt your president whenever you want to interrupt others. That's fine. The legality of students creating work for the school, though, I think, and I know Ms. Dan mentioned this because I had brought that up several times over the years. Unfortunately, I believe there are labor restrictions with asking students to do stuff. It would be so awesome because they could probably do graphics quicker than any of our folks could. I don't know. But we used to be told that students cannot do that stuff. So I would caution you all about doing that. There are also New Jersey Department of Education accountability regulations about specifically communications staff members. Communications staff can be full-time, but you just have to be very clear about their public relations work can only be 50% of their job. So that's why you see many districts who have a registrar/PR person or registrar/communications person. I mean, hate to have the district run afoul of DOE regulations. Also, out of district busing that you all, you're discussing but approving next time. I know you can't do much about it, but perhaps you can work with the esteemed legislators and others. You are going to be paying $1 million to bus 608 students to private schools. $1 million. And that's only that's 500,000 for private schools, 500,000 for private special ed schools. But amongst the private schools, the non-special ed, it's 608 students and only 22 of those are non-secular. So they're all some sort of faith-based school. So it's just a shame that New Jersey has to pay for busing religious schools. Growing up in Florida, we never had that. And I guess finally, two more things. I would be awesome if Miss Weldon could get back to me on if they found out about if we could do Wi-Fi in this building or even during back to school nights. I don't know if, Miss Gilman or Mr. Dalton tried to use their cell phones when they were at the school parent night, but you really can't use any cell phones when you're there. So it's really hard to look down at your phone at what your kid's schedule is. I couldn't even look up anything tonight. And then finally, maybe 5th or 6th year is a charm with giving up this building or doing something with this building. Mr. Hastings might be familiar with Asbury Parks getting rid of their school board building. They are no longer at the administration building. They ditched that and within a matter of weeks moved into, the elementary school or the middle school, 3rd floor. We were given a presentation a couple of years ago that it's going to take $1 million and lots of rehabbing to get folks from this building to the middle school. But if Asbury Park can do it in a matter of weeks to save them hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think Ocean can too. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. Ms. Conway, is there anyone in the queue?
Yes, there is. There's one commenter, Jonathan Shutman. Please go right ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Shutman?
Yeah, I saw I had to unmute, so you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thanks for this opportunity, Ms. Weldon and board. I came in on the discussion that had to do with strategic plans. And two things occurred to me. I think all the board members know that I've recently sent them some data. And in the past, I've sent them some data. It's public data. It's nothing I made up. It's available to everybody to see and look at. And it has to do with a variety of websites that report on how the schools are doing. And the data that I sent is, I believe, and should be for you, of great concern. There's a negative slope, first of all, that things go pretty well in the elementary schools, and I have ideas why that happens as a former elementary school principal. And then they seem to plummet as you go into middle school and in particularly high school. And I've made some suggestions to you folks. You can do with them what you want, but I think the district should really be concerned about this gradual decline in district ratings. And what might you really do about it? And how would a strategic plan address it? And a strategic plan really requires, I think, at this point in time, for this Board of Education and Administration, a rather deep dig, a really deep dig. What you need to do is, first of all, you need to research why other schools with similar demographics are doing better. There are at least 4 school districts and high schools that I know of that have exactly almost the same demographics. Don't tell me about people who live in apartments. I've had a comment like that before. They have similar demographics or almost the same and are doing commensurately much better. And so, first of all, I think you need to research what is going on in successful school systems and schools in Monmouth County. Then I think you got to get out into the field. And the way you can do that is with surveys. You can do it with focus groups. You can do it with even interviews of all the people involved in the school system, with the students, with the teachers, with the administration, and with the parents. Because there is some reason why this school system with similar demographics is not doing well. You can argue with me all you want. The data is what it is, and it's public, and people can read it. As a matter of fact, go to any house that is on sale right now in Ocean Township, and at the bottom of that house listing will be the school system. And to me, that would be of great concern. Of greater concern is frankly what's going on with the kids. Okay, so I'm looking at some notes I wrote, mostly what I had to. I think there was a lot of jargon in your discussion about strategic plans, using words like innovative. I have no idea what innovative means. One thing I would say is that any educational program is only as successful as it is implemented. And so it can be the greatest program in the world, and if it isn't implemented in a way that it should be or can be, then it's really wasted. The other thing is, and I believe this is probably so, is that there is a need to start to integrate learning in the school system in terms of connections. Kids will learn math if they see its relevance. Kids will learn math if they start to talk to people like people who are in the field and community volunteers who tell them why math matters to them. And they'll also learn math when it grabs them as something that's truly interesting. But they'll also learn math when they see how it's applied in science and how it might be applied in social studies. So that when your kids are taking tests, the tests are not exclusive to the subject matter, but the test and what they learn has relevance in a total way, in a holistic way. So those are some comments I have for you as a school system. I have no interest in running for Board of Education, so don't worry about that. But I do have an interest at this point in time in my life in really what's going on. And so that is why I'm here tonight. I think you people should do a deep dig and start to find out what's really going on, where teachers will not have reprisals and administrators will not have reprisals, but find out what's really going on. Do some focus groups, get some outside people to do it for you, and get some real data on what's going on in the system, and then maybe these strategic plans will make sense. That's enough from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shutman, for your comments. Ms. Conway, is there anyone else in the queue?
Yes, Madam President, Lori Todd.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I have two things. One, I'm not sure which field trip was on the agenda tonight, but if it's the field trip to come to Red Bank Regional for the new student athlete mental health initiative, we are very excited. The Game Changing Bucks are very excited to host our new Ocean Township High School Spartan student athletes at our training. So thank you for approving that field trip. We're happy to have that collaboration with your school district. Second thing, as a parent, I attended the Ocean Township High School back to school night. And what I found to be very helpful, instead of being on my cell phone against the cell phone policy, is the printout that Mrs. Kazuba sent as an attachment to her back to school night letter. I actually had my daughter fill out what her schedule was, and I found that very helpful that evening. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else, Ms. Conway?
No, Madam President, there are no further commenters.
Okay, thank you so much. May I please have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Gilman, Mr. McCarthy. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you.